This is the Week 5 lecture, Part 2, and in this part I'll be discussing the Stafford Act and the National Incident Management System, known as NIMS. The Stafford Act was enacted in 1988 and is named after the late Senator Robert Stafford of Vermont, and it supersedes the Disaster Relief Act of 1974. It gives the federal government the authority to supplement local, state, and tribal efforts when an event has officially been declared an emergency or a major disaster by the president. Logistically, the law specifies that the assistance comes through FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And as mentioned previously, the support that this law provides is not intended to supplant efforts at the local, state, and tribal level, but instead to provide support to those resources. Verbiage in that law reads, emergency means any occasion for or instance for which, in the determination of the President, federal assistance is needed to supplement state and local efforts and capabilities to save lives and to protect property and public health and safety, or to lessen or avert the threat of a catastrophe in any part of the United States. So this means that the President can declare an emergency regardless of the cause. Now, regarding a major disaster, the law says that it can mean any natural catastrophe. You got hurricane, tornado, wind-driven water, landslide, mudslide, snowstorm, drought. Regardless of cause, any fire, flood, or explosion in any part of the United States which in the determination of the President causes damage of sufficient severity and magnitude to warrant major disaster assistance under this Act to supplement the efforts and available resources of states, local governments, and disaster relief organizations in alleviating the damage, loss, hardship, or suffering caused thereby. Now, interestingly enough, the terminology in the law indicates that the declaration of an emergency is more broad and covers more situations than a major disaster. You'll see here it says any occasion or instance for which federal assistance is needed. Very broad. Major disaster, any natural catastrophe or sufficient severity and magnitude to warrant major disaster assistance. However, the level of assistance gained from the federal government is not the same. While the application for an emergency declaration is broader, it comes with greater limitations on its assistance. Emergencies are not accompanied with the same level of long-term federal recovery programs that a major disaster declaration receives. So, from the perspective of the one that requests the help, it would be more beneficial to have their situation declared a major disaster. Now, the process by which a declaration is made goes like this. The local government responds with local resources, including volunteer and community resources. When they are overwhelmed, the state responds with their resources, possibly even including the National Guard. When that response has been determined to be insufficient, there are damage assessments that take place at all levels, local, state, and tribal. And based on those assessments, the governor lodges a request along with a commitment that the state will designate funds to the long-term recovery effort. FEMA evaluates the request and forwards that to the White House with their own recommendation, and then ultimately the President, him or herself, approves or denies the request. So the final thing to note about the Stafford Act is that there is nothing in the law that compels the government to take any action. It exists only to grant the federal government authority to provide that supplemental assistance. All right, now we shift our attention to the National Incident Management System, or NIMS. And according to the Department of Homeland Security, NIMS provides a systematic, proactive approach to guide departments and agencies at all levels of government, non-governmental organizations, NGOs, and the private sector to work seamlessly to prevent, protect against, respond to, recover from, and mitigate the effects of incidents regardless of cause, size, location, or complexity in order to reduce the loss of life and property and harm to the environment. Hopefully you recognize that the Department of Homeland Security incorporated the 5 mission areas of preparedness in there. In short, the purpose of NIMS is to develop a more unified approach to managing incidents. Any of you that have or currently do work in a military or paramilitary organization know the importance of everyone at the incident having a clear understanding of the overarching mission, the individual objectives, the commander's intent, etc., that make incident management possible. In the past, when an outsider listened to a briefing at a critical incident, it would not be uncommon for them to come away very confused, even if they were a veteran first responder themselves. This is because there is frequently a culture or a common understanding or a common language to that specific group and that developed within that specific agency. For example, when I first started my law enforcement career, the NIMS model was not in effect. If I were to stand next to a fireman that was serving at an incident commander, I would have had very little understanding of what he was doing. What they meant when they used the term zones or sectors might be very different from what I understand them to mean. And in today's NIMS world, however, we have managed to unify much of our language and tactics to conform to the national directive. While I still am ill-prepared to dispatch a fire crew, I can now stand next to the fire department's incident commander and have a pretty good idea what he's directing his people to do. In short, the NIMS model is a template for the management of incidents. For the agencies that are NIMS compliant, they are all working out of the same playbook, and that is a recipe for success. To further clarify the concept here, is a list of what NIMS is and what it is not. NIMS provides a systematic approach to an incident, meaning that logistically and with resources and the communication. It provides a unified set of preparedness concepts. That means they are on the same page with those mission areas I've already discussed. And it creates a common picture. NIMS compliant organizations will be more inclined to talk to each other about ultimate goals. In other words, maybe they are facing the same direction. And also, it's scalable. This means it can be used at every incident, regardless of size. And what it is not, conversely, is, for instance, a response plan. That means that this NIMS does not tell you how to deploy your resources, it just provides the framework. And it's not for large-scale incidents only. Also, it's not just for select personnel. This isn't just for the command and general staff to use. This should be part of the language and the operating culture of the entire organization. And then lastly there, it's not a static system. So remember, it's scalable, it can adjust, it can adapt, it can be flexible. If the incident grows larger, the NIMS model has the ability to grow larger, or if it starts to get much smaller, then the NIMS model has the ability to do that as well. From a personal perspective, I can attest that NIMS has become increasingly pervasive within public safety. It is now commonplace to use the NIMS framework when planning special events. Whether it's a Tempe New Year's Eve block party, or an Arizona Cardinals game, or a local Halloween festival, many cities now use NIMS in their planning efforts. This streamlines efforts within cities among various departments, such as Parks and Recreation, the Police Department, the Fire Department, maybe the Streets Department, and City Management. Additionally, it is beneficial when hosting events that require the assistance of outside agency personnel. The forms are standardized, the incident command structure is standardized, and the language is standardized. And that is a huge leap forward from a not too distant past.